Hello and welcome to the Capital Games Movie Club. I am the Wiz. Zero is not here right now. He's solving the murder mystery of the Texas two-step killer. You better look out, Zero. You don't know where he's going to come next. But I have faith in you. I believe you can figure it out. Anyway, so today and for the next 2 weeks, I thought a great theme to have for the next 2 weeks is, of course, Halloween movies. There's a slight problem with Halloween movies with me specifically, and that is I hate scary movies. I've never liked them. I mean, okay, that's not entirely true. There are a couple that I do enjoy, but for the most part, I don't enjoy watching movies where the sole purpose of it is to scare or to or just horror in itself. Like, I don't enjoy it. It's not that I'm scared of it. I just don't find them to be that entertaining or that good. There's exceptions, like Midsommar, I think I mentioned in the last episode, Hereditary, The Descent. There are a few of the Silence of the Lambs. There are a few exceptions, but for the most part, I'm not a fan of scary movies. But because it's Halloween, and I'll be honest, I hate Halloween. I can't stand Halloween. I don't get why so many people love this holiday, but okay, fine. But since it is Halloween, I thought it would be still a good idea to watch some movies to get in the mood for the season. But since I hate scary movies, I decided to go ahead and watch non-scary, scary movies. Scary being in quotes, because these are not real. It doesn't make sense, but just basically movies that fit within the theme of Halloween. And I had an idea of what I wanted to watch, but then somebody on on Zero's Discord recommended this movie, and since it was just being released on Criterion, it wasn't a bad idea. And the movie that they suggested and I watched was Arsenic and Old Lace, the Frank Capra movie starring Cary Grant. And this was a movie in 1944. Wow, that's a long time ago. Yes, the 1944 movie directed by Frank Capra. This is like a lot of Frank Capra films. It's a screwball comedy, but it's very different because it's also a dark comedy. Now, it being from the 40s, it's not terribly dark, but it deals with macabre themes, and it deals with death in a humorous way. So that's kind of how it is, I guess, dark comedy in that sense. That was something I was a little surprised about when I read about the film and I started watching it. Is just, I guess, not how dark it is, because in today's standards, it's not very dark at all. But I can imagine back then people being a little shocked by what they were watching. But, you know, by today's standards, it's harmless, fairly. It deals with the tropes of the day to a certain extent. People with scars look like monsters and are evil, and people who sound different are insidious, and that stuff, right, as well. And so it deals with the tropes of the day, but it still does it in a fairly humorous way that is enjoyable when you watch the movie. So, and screwball. Let's talk about screwball comedies as well before we get to the review. Screwball comedies is something that from time to time you see nowadays, but it was much more popular between the years of 1930 and 1950. We're talking films like Some Like It Hot, Designed for Living, Bringing Up Baby, My Man Godfrey, a great movie. It Happened One Night, another fantastic movie. These types of films don't really get made anymore because they deal with a lot of it's physical comedy, but it's done in a very silly, kind of not so serious way, especially with how people are nowadays. they wouldn't exactly work, because they do broad comedy, but they do it stereotypically to a certain extent. But it's all in good fun, and it's all in jest to a certain extent. So yeah, like it's not offensive in any way. To Be or Not to Be is another great screwball comedy. It's not offensive in any way, but for, I guess, people who want to watch comedy with the sensibility of today, yet screwball comedies really aren't something that I think a lot of younger people and people that look for films that reflect themselves to a certain extent will go to. But some of the best comedies are screwball. Like I mentioned, Some Like It Hot is a Stone Cold classic. My Man Godfrey. It happened one night. Like today, if you were to watch it, you'd have fun, you would enjoy it, and it would be a great movie. And I kept hearing that Arsenic and Old Lace is like that, except for people who are into dark comedies. So I was fairly excited by the prospect of watching this movie. So let's get into my opinion of Arsenic and Old Lace. I wasn't expecting it to be terribly dark. Like, I'm used to dark comedies like the Coen Brothers does dark comedies. That they deal with death, but in a humorous way. Something along those lines. Those are the type of dark comedies. Or comedies that, how would I put this, would deal with serious subject matter in not just a lighthearted way, but just in a comedic sense, where you laugh at kind of the darkness in what's being talked about. Like Brazil, I think, would be a dark comedy to a certain extent, while it also being a satire. But that's what I'm used to with dark comedies. So I was kind of surprised when I watched the film, even though it deals with macabre themes and horror themes, how absolutely lighthearted it was. So that was kind of a surprise when I was watching this. It shouldn't have been. It shouldn't have been a complete surprise because of the time it was made. But I was watching it, and I was expecting it to get mildly disturbing, maybe a little unsettling, and it didn't go that route at all. Which is fine. It's not that big of a deal. It's not something I'm going to criticize it for. When I watched it, I was expecting one thing to a certain extent to happen, and it just didn't do it. And that's kind of the thing with screwball comedy too. They want to keep it light. They want to keep it fun to a certain extent. They want you to have a good time, and that's what was kind of weird about this movie, because the story is basically that Mortimer, a drama critic who's also an author, gets married in the beginning of the movie. And he tells us his two aunts that he got married and they're going to go on his honeymoon. And their aunts, and then he finds a dead body in one of his aunts' a window box of sorts, which sets into motion him starting to find out that his aunts are serial killers, essentially. They poison what they call sad, lonely men, and have their mentally deficient son bury them in the cellar. Who thinks he's Teddy Roosevelt? That's the plot right there. He finds out what they've been up to, and he tries to correct the situation, and it does it with disastrous results to a certain extent. That's the plot of the film. Those of you who've seen Bringing Up Baby know that even though Cary Grant can be a serious, charismatic, likable actor, he is very good in physical comedy. He has no problem, even though he can be very charismatic, being an actor who can humiliate himself, make him look silly, make him look not serious, not likable, kind of like just the thing with back then, and it's still to this day. If you look a certain way, people want you to act a certain way, and in order to get more popular, you just do what the audience wants. They want you smiling and kissing the heroine at the end of the movie and showing your dashing smile. That's what you do because that's what makes the money. Cary Grant was different. Cary Grant not only did those types of movies, he did those too, but he also did these screwball comedies with a lot of physical humor. Like, a lot of physical humor. And he was very good at it, not just because like he can do physical comedy very well, but the juxtaposition of him being so charming and so handsome, doing all these outlandish physical comedy and distorting his face in comedic ways seemed to work very well for him, which was, if I recall reading correctly, that was kind of a surprise for people back then. Now it's not so much, but you know, that's what made him, I guess, pretty popular. He didn't end up getting an Academy Award. He got an honorary Oscar, but okay, no big deal on that one. That thing with Cary Grant is shown throughout the entire movie. His way of doing physical comedy and to act outlandish and act pretty much like unsettled throughout the entire film. And it's done in a good comedic effect. It's funny throughout the entire film, which, again, if you've seen Bringing Up Baby, you know that he can do that, and he does it very well. So, not a surprise. What I became surprised by in certain aspects of the film is when it started getting progressively darker. Sometimes with dark comedies, the dark comedies that have problems. The problem that comes across when it comes to a dark comedy is that when it's time to get dark, either they get too dark or they don't mix well with the lightheartedness, but with the humor. You have to find like really dark things to be humorous to a certain extent in order to enjoy them. And that's okay with some people. There are some dark comedies that really deal with fucked up things, and some can find the humor in it. But I think really good dark comedies can marry them both to a certain extent, where even when they're dealing with something very screwed up, that it's still, in a sense, humorous. And for the most part, Arsenic and Old Lace does that well. When some characters are introduced, and we'll get to that in spoilers, when some characters are introduced that darken the film to be a little more disturbing, the humor is still there to a certain extent. It doesn't go too dark, but it goes dark enough to fit the setting of what's going on. The performances are pretty good. Of course, Cary Grant is very good in the movie, like I mentioned. The lead actress, Priscilla Lane, doesn't really have much to do in this, but she's good. She's just a lovable now wife of the main character who gets sidetracked throughout the entire film. And that's fine. She did good for what she had. Raymond Massey was actually very good as Mortimer's brother, Cary Grant's brother in the movie. And even though he's supposed to be a more serious character, he plays the performance pretty well for a comedy. And that was one character that I was afraid when I saw it that it would veer too dark and might have an issue, but it didn't happen. What I want to point out, though, it's a good performance is Peter Lorre as Dr. Einstein. Peter Lorre, where I'm used to seeing him as a screwed up character, morally bankrupt, disturbing. The one that I think is his best performance is the movie M, which was a German film in the 30s. I believe it's the 30s, where he played a child killer. And that's what I know him for. To see him doing this movie in a comedy and it working pretty well was a bit of a surprise, and it actually was done very well by him. And and that performance was a fun performance, even though he was pretty much playing the Igor to Raymond Massey's character to a certain extent. But it's a good performance. And the two women who played the aunts, which is Jean Adair and Josephine Hall, they're good. They're good in the movie. A bit annoying, but I think that's just the character. That's just how they're done. I mean, the characters and that's also kind of a staple to screwball comedies to a certain extent. The characters aren't that deep, but they're meant to get the comedy going. They're meant to bring the laughs. So and this is especially for the time too. They're meant to be a little broad to a certain extent. And when it comes to writing these characters, it's not that deep. But for a comedy, especially of this type, it's good. It's pretty good. Let's get into writing. The writing is good. When the dark subject matter happens, I think it's pretty good. When the romance stuff happens is when it kind of falls apart, because they kind of go into, and again, this is the time, this is just how it is, but they go into the more stereotypical love interest, lovey-dovey, just getting married tropes that they have, except for the main character was an author who pretty much shit on people who got married, and which is a detail that I guess looking back was just not necessary, but it's fine. It's a common trope in those movies, especially back then, where the new husband was just not sure and really didn't want to get married, but he got married anyway because he loved the girl, even though he detests the thought of actually getting married and hates the idea of it. That's kind of a trope. So again, not incredibly deep with the writing. The dark comedy is good, but the lighter aspects not so hot in this. And of course, Frank Capra's direction is very good. The way he frames a shot, the way he gets the scene started. The whole movie is basically in a house. And I never was really bored, or the film never felt like it was dragging at times. So the way that it's directed to be not plotting, but a quippy kind of fast-paced, not fast-paced, but a briskly paced film is pretty good for the movie itself. It's not one of my favorite Capra films. It Happened One Night, I think, will always be my favorite Capra. I know a lot of people are going to say It's a Wonderful Life is probably his best, which, sure, that's a good one. Some might say Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Others might, well, I don't think anyone would say You Can't Take That With You, but it's on its IMDb. It's a good Capra film. It's not his best, but I know, I understand, I do understand, though, why people like this film. I understand why people have affection for it. Because it is, especially for its time, it is a very different film. And I can appreciate that. I can. It's, for what it is, for the type of dark comedy it's going for, it is good. But he has better films. And I guess I'll put it this way. If you really like screwball comedies, and you really like dark comedies, I would say you would actually really enjoy this film. But that's the thing I have with this movie, is I don't know a lot of people that I could recommend that to, because usually people who are into dark comedies don't like the lighthearted affairs. You know, they don't. If they're into, let's say, Coen Brothers or In Bruges or something like that, it's kind of hard to say, hey, you know what? Bring Up Baby is a good movie, because they'll look at you like, I don't like those type of movies. I like my humor biting. I like it dark. I like it semi-serious, kind of fucked up. It is kind of a weird mix that this film does with the screwball and the dark, but it works. It actually, it kind of works, isn't it? It's not his best film, not by a long shot, but it is a fun film. It's enjoyable. So yeah, like if you are into dark comedies, and if you're also one of those people who are into screwball comedies, like, give it a shot if you like both. But if you like one or the other, I think it would be an interesting watch just to watch like an old movie like this and see the directions they go. I think in that kind of interesting way, it would be an interesting watch. But I'm not entirely sure if I would recommend it to somebody who like really loves screwball comedies or someone who really loves dark comedies. That's the thing. Like, I mean, I would say it's a good movie, but for someone who likes just one of those, it would be kind of hard to actually recommend that, even though I do think it's a good movie. So, yeah, it's only complicated in the way of who I would recommend it to, but I do think it's a good movie that if you're interested in it, especially like Cary Grant, you know, give it a watch. It is pretty fun. I had a good time. All right, so we are at spoilers at this point. If you haven't watched the movie and you are interested in watching it, you can stop the podcast, turn it off, and come back after you've seen it. We are going to start spoilers now at 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so when it comes to spoilers in comedies, I don't really like talking about certain bits because I understand people want to go in blind, and if I tell them the joke and they're looking for it, it has less of an effect for most people. So I'm not going to really spoil bits, I think, in this. I think the Teddy Roosevelt thing was kind of funny. There's a character in the movie who is considered to be mentally unwell, but is played for laughs because he thinks he's Teddy Roosevelt. And when I first saw it, I kind of chuckled. I was like, that's kind of funny. But as the story went through, I was like, I don't know about this. Especially when you realize that it's that character who is burying all the bodies in the basement. That's where I was like, that doesn't feel good. But again, if you could take it less seriously and make it more of like, think of it more of a lighthearted romp, it may not bother you that much. But I sat there going, I don't know about this, but it's fine, I guess. Like I said, at first I was like, that's kind of funny. But as time went on, I was like, I don't know about that part. So, okay, the Teddy Roosevelt thing had its moments. The Jonathan Brewster, which is the brother of the main character, who gets in the film, he's constantly referenced as looking as like Boris Karloff, which pisses him off because he has scars and he does look like a Frankenstein caricature to a certain extent. I actually really liked the character. I thought he was the most interesting of and the best character in the entire movie. And again, a sign of the times. Throughout the film, I kept thinking, what would happen if someone decided to remake this film? And I think the biggest change would be with the brother, which is Jonathan. Because I could see a dark comedy working where this character isn't it doesn't look like a monster, and it would still work. Like technically, well, yeah, American Psycho is a dark comedy, even though it deals with disturbing subjects. So I think it would have a tone like that to a certain extent. I don't know if they would decide to go all bloody and gory, which I think would mess with the tone of the film. But yeah, like that's some thoughts I thought about while watching the film. But Jonathan, I think, was the best character in the movie. Things started to really get interesting when he showed up, and what little drama there was in the movie went because of Jonathan. So it was an interesting thing to watch in this movie. And I mentioned, it was basically Jonathan and Dr. Einstein, who is Peter Lorre in the movie. I think were the two funniest characters because they played very well off of each other, and yeah, they made Jonathan into the villain in the entire movie, which of course, because which is how he is. But to give him someone like Peter Lorre to be like no, don't do it, don't think it was kind of funny. So I enjoyed that a lot on there. As much as I like Cary Grant in the movie, I mean, his character is kind of meh. Like he just does one thing, and again, that's just part of the times. That's just how it is. That's how they did these comedies. I watched the movie, and I'm just like not really interested in the main character at all. I'm not interested in the romance. I gotta be honest. At times, I get kind of annoyed with him, with how he reacted to everything. I understood why he reacted the way he did when he found out that his aunts are serial killers. Like, I had I had some minor issues. Is it something that I think ruins the film? No. It's just that when his character would come up at times, not all the time, but at times, it just kind of got a little grating. But it wasn't that big of an issue. That's really it. I don't really want to go into more specifics in a comedy, especially with something not this deep. Like what I like a lot about this film is the mix, really. It's the mix of dark, disturbing kind of subject matter with such a light-hearted kind of feel to it. And I thought it was very interesting, and for the most part, it worked well. I just, like I said in the non-spoiler part, I'm going to have a very tough time figuring out who I'm going to recommend this to. Because these are two completely separate people that I would see that would like certain aspects of the movie. And I'm not entirely sure if they want to marry them both in a certain way. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. There are people who are fans of this movie. So it's not without the realm of possibility. But, that's the only issue I really have with the film. Like, I think it's a good film. It's a 3.5 star for me with this movie. But the only issue I'm ever going to have with this is who do I recommend this to? Who is this for? Because just the subject matter and the way it's presented is odd. But it's odd in a good way. Okay, so now that I'm done with spoilers, let's get into the final discussion, the final thoughts on the film. Like I said in both the non-spoiler and spoiler review, this is an odd duckling. It marries two different types of movies that often don't mix very well, but somehow worked in this movie. And I ended up enjoying it despite a couple of problems I had with it. Not big problems, not problems that ruined my experience, but just minor issues that I had. Cary Grant's good in the movie. I think the best performance is Raymond Massey, who plays his brother, and Peter Lorre, who is actually pretty funny in this too. I think those two are the best part of the movie. Other than that, I mean, I think you'll know if you are interested in this movie, and if you are, check it out. But if you're not sure, I mean, if you like screwball comedies, I would say give it a shot. If you like dark comedies, give it a shot. Just be prepared for how odd it is. I think odd's not really the right term, but odd is. But I think you might have some whiplash to a certain extent as to what you like in a movie. Because if you're into dark comedies, it's not really that dark because they do it in such a lighthearted way. But if you're in lighthearted movies, you might not like the subject matter so much. But it's done in such a carefree and kind of enjoyable way. I kind of think I would say for both sense, give it a shot. You might find yourself enjoying it. So I recommend this movie. I give it 3.5 stars. It's not my favorite Capra, but it's a good movie. And it's a good Capra movie. So if anything, if you like Capra and you haven't watched it yet, I mean, what are you waiting for at this point? It's on Criterion now. You should watch it. Okay, so we are at the end of the review. And when this happens every month, we talk about the new movies that are announced from Criterion. Criterion announced new titles that are coming in January, and I thought I would go over them right now with you. They announced 5 different packages, totaling, I believe, 6 movies, and I'll just go over them now with you. The first movie that they announced was The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. I thought this was already a Criterion movie, but apparently not. I don't know if this was released during their VHS or Laserdisc days, but I could have sworn they had a DVD of this, but apparently they didn't, and it is coming January 3rd. This is the film by Terry Gilliam. This was a notorious box office bomb, if I recall correctly, but it has gained a devoted following when it comes to Gilliam's films. So if you like movies like Brazil or Time Bandits and you haven't seen this film, you might want to pick it up because Gilliam, I like Gilliam a lot, actually. I'm not a fan of his most famous work, which is A Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that movie, really. But there are people who are, and I get it. And if you are interested in any of Gilliam's films, that might be one to pick up. The next one is Imitation of Life, the film by John M. Stahl. I know Imitation of Life was also remade by Douglas Sirk later on, but they're doing the original film. And this one was with Claudette Colbert, actress that I loved in It Happened One Night. So there's that. I gotta be honest. I've heard of this film and I'm interested in watching it. I just don't know much about it. I know the Douglas Sirk film pretty well. I guess in that aspect, I'm kind of interested in this movie. This comes out January 10th. January 17th. Lars von Trier's Europe trilogy. Lars von Trier is interesting with me. I have been endlessly fascinated with him, and I've seen I've seen stuff on his films and what they're about, and I've always been interested. But his subject matter and the way he does it, I have been told, can be so disturbing and so unsettling. It's kind of hard to watch. I've heard people specifically tell me about Dancer in the Dark and what happens at the end of that movie and how utterly devastating it is. Like he's one of these filmmakers that when he does a film, like you have to mentally prepare yourself in advance. When I watched Requiem for a Dream for the first time a few years ago, I was prepared because after that, immediately I watched a Disney film. I was like, all right, palate cleanser. So that's kind of how I prepare with those types of films. It's the Europe trilogy, and it's The Element of Crime, Epidemic, and Europa is what's being released on the 17th as a box set. It's a Blu-ray box set, not 4K. Some people are disappointed by that, but oh well. Next one. This is not a burial. It's a resurrection. Directed by... Oh my god. I'm going to butcher this poor person's name. Directed by Limahang Jeremiah Moses. This is hailed from the country of Lesotho? My god. I have not heard of this movie. I've not heard of this director. And I haven't even heard of the country where he's from. But that's fascinating. Okay. Apparently in 2009, this did really well in the festival circuits. That's all I've heard about this. And I'm looking at some of the photos of the movie right now. It looks interesting. It does look interesting. But I gotta be honest, I have never heard of this movie. But that's also what I like about the Criterion Collection. Because, yes, there are movies that I'm going to be very familiar with that I will want to pick up. But they also have these types of films that I have never heard of, but sound interesting. So that's something to look forward to. We'll see. We'll see if I jump on that one. And the final film that they announced for January is Bergman Island, directed by Mia Hansen-Love. I've heard about this film. And basically it's a story about a woman who visits the island of Ingmar Bergman, where Ingmar Bergman has lived for, I don't know the entire story, but I've heard it's good. And I've heard it's also pretty respectful to Ingmar Bergman as well, to a certain extent. And me being an Ingmar Bergman fan, I would have thought I probably would have seen this already, but sadly I haven't. It stars Mia Wasikowska, I think is the name. And I think this also had Tim Roth in this. I've heard good things. I've actually heard good things about this movie. So I'm interested. Hopefully this will get on the Criterion channel so I can check it out. Otherwise, these movies are coming out in January, and look forward to that when it happens. Another thing that happened in Criterion Land is that a flash sale happened last week. And when that happens, I, of course, make purchases, and I add to my already growing collection of Blu-rays and 4Ks. And I thought, as always, when people talk about the Criterion Collection online and on Facebook and on YouTube, they talk about their hauls. So I thought, why not I do the same thing? So let's go. And I'll tell you what I got and who the director is and little things about the movies and discuss why I chose them. So here we go. The first movie I got, of course, is Arsenic and Old Lace. The reason why I got it is I like Cary Grant and I like Frank Capra, and I've heard good things, and they were founded. So I decided, and honestly, I might have passed on this until someone recommended it to me for the podcast. So, because the other movie I was going to watch was Haxan, but someone recommended this, and it was a good idea. So that's the only reason why I got it, and I'm glad I did. So that was a fun movie. I liked it. The Worst Person in the World, directed by Jacques Trier. This made a lot of buzz last year. A lot of people thought this might have been nominated for Best Picture and Best Actress in the Oscars this past year. It didn't happen for whatever reason. The actress did win Best Actress at Cannes that year. So this is a very celebrated film, and I wanted to watch this. I was very interested in seeing this movie, and since it's in Criterion, you know, that's the reason to purchase it, I guess. Walker, directed by Alex Cox, was the next one. I'm an Ed Harris fan, so that was one reason. The other reason is that I've seen some of Alex Cox's films, and he is pretty damn good. The one that really got me started with him was Repo Man. And if you haven't seen Repo Man, I highly recommend it, especially if you like science fiction and you like comedies. In that film, specifically, he does the punk motif really well. I think better than I think I've ever seen a film do. It specifically felt punk to me, being somebody who was never into punk in the first place. But I definitely felt it in that movie. So I would definitely recommend that if you haven't seen Repo Man, check that out. But that's why I got Walker, because I've heard good things about this movie, and I'm a fan of Ed Harris. So that was the reason I got that movie. Tampopo is the next one, directed by Yuzo Atami. I gotta tell you, every time when Criterion's discussed on Twitter or on Facebook, everyone raves about this movie. Everyone. They have nothing but great things to say, and that's literally the only reason why I picked it up, because I keep hearing great things about this movie. So I picked that up as well. The Kennedy Films of Robert Drew and Associates. A little background about myself. When I was younger, I was really into the U.S. presidents. For some weird reason, I used to collect cards on the backs of Little Debbie boxes that were basically trading cards of U.S. presidents. And I collected them for a period of time, and I kept them for years until I don't know what happened to them. I think they got thrown out. I forgot how. And I knew, and I started learning about them and learning like different weird things about them. And I've always been fascinated with John F. Kennedy. I think anybody who has a slight interest in U.S. presidents has, because of just not only just the circumstances of his death, but of how he got into power and what he did in the presidency. Like, he's a fascinating person. So I saw that, and I saw that Albert Massey did this as well. I was like, you know what? I'll give this a shot. I will probably check those out at my own leisure at some point. All That Jazz, directed by Bob Fosse, starring Roy Scheider. I'm into musicals. I'm into dance movies to a certain extent. And All That Jazz is just something that everyone says is a great movie if you're into those things. And I like Bob Fosse, so that works. I had no problem making that purchase. Medium Cool, starring Robert Forster, a young Robert Forster, directed by Haskell Wexler. This is weird. This is a weird movie. I didn't know much about it, but I've heard that they do something pretty fascinating. Apparently, there are scenes in the film that were filmed during a riot or a demonstration with real people. Like, they married the fiction with reality to a certain extent in this movie, and it's what makes it pretty unique. So just for that reason, I thought, why not give it a shot? And I like Robert Forster. Robert Forster is one of my favorite movies of all time, which is Jackie Brown. To see a young Robert Forster, okay, I'll give that a shot. The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. Okay, I like John le Carre stories. I will say I've never read any of them. I've seen the movies. I especially love Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. And when this started getting recommended, and it being a John le Carre film, or is it Le Carre? I'm sorry, Le Carre. When I saw this was being on Criterion, I wanted to pick this up and watch it. I thought this would be a nice. This might be something interesting I'd be into. Sound of Metal, I've been interested in watching. It's on Amazon. I haven't watched it yet, but I've heard great things, so I thought I'd pick that up. Lost Highway, I am a big Lynch fan. I have seen a few of his films. I've seen, of course, Mulholland Drive. I've seen parts of Twin Peaks. I've seen Blue Velvet, which is great. And I've always been fascinated, and I've seen some of his shorts too. I've always been fascinated by David Lynch. And Lost Highway was one I haven't been able to pick up. And since it's available, and it was available in 4K, I picked it up right away. The 400 Blows, directed by Francois Truffaut. I saw this 5 years ago and adored the movie. I thought it was so good. And it was my introduction to Truffaut. And I held off on buying this in the hopes that the Antoine Doinel series of films would come back to Criterion as a box set in Blu-ray or on 4K, but it doesn't look like they're doing that. I just lost my nerve and just said, you know what, I want it, so I'll buy it anyway. You know, and watching a couple months, they announced that box set. So, yeah, that's why I got 400 Blows. Fantastic movie if you haven't watched it. Definitely recommend it. But, yeah, that's why I got that. And finally, Devil in a Blue Dress. I saw this a while back, like when it first came out on VHS. God, in 96, 97? And I liked it. This is directed by Carl Franklin. I liked the movie. Do I remember a lot about it? Not really, to be pretty frank. But I've always wanted to revisit it. So when it became a Criterion Collection edition, this is from 95. This became an addition to the Criterion Collection. I was really interested in picking it up, and that's pretty much why. I wanted to rewatch it, and I haven't seen it in a long time. I want to give it another shot to see what a fresher pair of eyes would show with this movie. So, yeah, that's why I got those. And that's my haul. That is my Criterion flash sale haul for October. Usually it's in November, but yeah. I think there's going to be another Criterion sale on either November or December on Barnes & Noble. They haven't announced it yet, but I think that's coming soon. So you might get another haul in another month or so. It might be a smaller haul. I went a little overboard this time. But yeah, that was my haul for the Criterion sale for this month. All right, well, we're at the end of the episode. But before I go, we have a final question to go over to the end for the end of the podcast. So we talked about some classic films, some heady artistic films. Why don't we just go back to the meat and potatoes, which is, of course, superhero films. Black Adam is being released this week. Looks like starting today. Oh, it's previews. Previews are starting today. And it'll be released everywhere tomorrow, which is Friday the 21st. DC and Warner Brothers Discovery has been advertising this film and hyping this film for months. And so has Dwayne Johnson. He has been on Twitter and going on all sorts of gaming streams and stuff like that, advertising this film. And they want and it's clear they want this to be a huge film. They want this to be a big film. And with a star like Dwayne Johnson, who I think still to this day is the most money-making actor out there right now, they are pretty much expecting this to happen. Well, the reason why I'm saying this is because reviews have been going out, and it doesn't look like Black Adam is getting great reviews. I'm going to go on Metacritic right now. Yeah, Black Adam is at a 40 with 38 critic reviews. That's at mixed to average ratings, mixed to average reviews. Critics are pretty much calling it a boilerplate superhero film. Nothing spectacular, nothing really different. It's basically, if you're used to the Marvel stuff, you know what to expect here, is basically what people are saying. I will say, for those who defend the DCEU, that I do think critics really overstate how good the Marvel movies are. Like, on average, those makes like 7. Like, let me look at Thor: Love and Thunder. Okay, Thor: Love and Thunder. Oh, Thor: Love and Thunder got a 57. Okay, that I agree with. But there are some that got like 80s and 90s. Let's look at Captain Marvel. Yeah, Captain Marvel got a 64. Okay, that's a bit generous, but the Marvel movies seem to get a pass sometimes on mediocre movies, whereas the DCEU movies get eviscerated. I will say though, the Joss Whedon version of the Justice League was awful. It was horrible. So I understood exactly why that got terrible reviews. Like, I understood that one, no problem. But, like, Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, they're not terrible films, but they're not bad. That got lambasted when it was, that got a 44 from critics on Metacritic. Like, that I think is a little harsh. So do I think that critics are probably being a little harsh when it comes to Black Adam? That might be a possibility. But nothing in the trailer and everything they've been showing has not shown me that they were doing something different or it's going to be something special. I mean, they were relying on basically Dwayne Johnson to actually to carry this film to pretty much to a large degree. Does it surprise me that the critics are not being too kind? No, not really. I guess the question that I would pose is Black Adam going to revive the DCEU? And I think it's still a maybe at this point. I mean, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is still a moneymaker in cinema. He still makes tons of cash. So we don't know if, like, his popularity will lead people to go into theaters. And still, people love comic book movies. And there is a fan base that do want DC movies. They do. Unfortunately, they go see the bad films, but they don't watch the good films because there's the Suicide Squad, the sequel to the Suicide Squad, which was actually very good. I thought it was actually really good. That I don't think barely anybody saw because the first Suicide Squad was pretty bad. So, yeah, there's that. This could still do very well and could revive the DCEU. I just don't like the direction DCEU is going, because if they're going to go the Marvel route, I think they're going to have such a hard time. I think it's not going to work. I mean, like, I've heard the Batman is pretty good. I haven't seen it yet, so I can't criticize on it, but the DCEU had some strengths. Aquaman was pretty good. The early buzz is that The Flash is actually a good movie. So there is that as well. So we have The Flash that might turn out to be pretty good. I know they canceled Batgirl, and I will still say to this day, if the company that put the money down took a look at it and go, "Oh, we're not making our money back, let's just shit can it," it must have not been good. And I understand people are mad and want to see a Batgirl movie, but if it was that bad, you wouldn't have wanted to see it. Black Adam could work. It could save the DCEU. But if the audiences don't like this movie, like if the cinema scores and the buzz on Twitter is that this is mediocre or it's not good from, like, regular film fans, yeah, they could be in some trouble. This could end up being not very good. And this could end up being, it could end up being Dwayne Johnson's first box office bomb in a long time. And it won't hurt him necessarily, but it won't be good. That will put a dent in the armor of his sterling box office draw. But do I think that my thought process when it comes to DCEU is that they shouldn't bother having a continuing story. Like, don't do it. I mean, have Wonder Woman have her own thing. Have Black Adam and Shazam have their own thing. Have Green Lantern have his own thing. Just do it that way. And maybe do a crossover where they would meet up in some way, like as a special story. Like, maybe do that. But to go, like, multiverse or to go through the whole storyline that the Marvel Cinematic Universe did, there's only room for one of that. And I don't see anybody wanting to have a second thing where they would have to watch 20 to 30 films just to know what happens in the 31st film. I don't think people want that. I think it's completely okay to have everything on different timelines. And a good example of that is really DC and their animated movies. The animated movies at DC are actually very good. If you haven't seen any of them, I would recommend Under the Red Hood. I'd recommend, the Batman Returns. Not the Batman Returns. What is that movie? Oh man, I'm losing my nerd cred, guys. Doom is another one I'd recommend. All-Star Superman. There's a Batman one that was released a few years ago that's based off of a comic by Frank Miller, which is really good. I'm blanking on it. I think it's The Dark Knight Returns. There we go. The Dark Knight Returns. They separate it into two different movies. But that was really good. That's a really good movie as well. If you really are craving good DC movies, check out the animated stuff. They're actually really good. I would recommend those. Do I think that this movie will jumpstart the DCEU? I think it will make its money back and a little bit more, but I don't think this is going to be the thing that kickstarts the DCEU into overdrive. I think this will just make money and that's it. I don't think it's going to do anything else other than that. All right, well, on that note, we are at the end of this podcast, but before we exit off, I'm going to talk about the film I'm going to watch next week. In staying with the theme of scary movies, I'm choosing a movie that I've wanted to see for a while, but haven't gotten around to it. And I don't know even the reason why I haven't gotten around to it, because it's from a director that I really like, and his movies have, for the most part, been outstanding. And he's done films like James and the Giant Peach. He's done The Night Before Christmas. You guys pretty much know where I'm going here. He's done... there's a movie he did a while back called Monkey Bone, which unfortunately bombed in the box office. It bombed horribly. But it's still a pretty damn good movie. And the movie we're going to watch next week is Coraline, directed by Henry Selick. It's a stop-motion animation feature. I love stop-motion animation. And it's based off of a book by Neil Gaiman. Ooh, I didn't know that. That's cool. Okay. So, yeah, I'm really interested in this movie. So, and I've been interested in a while, and I'm going to take this excuse with this theme that we have here to watch Coraline. So, that is the end of the episode of the Capital Games Movie Club. Tune in next week where I discuss the 2009 stop-motion animation film Coraline, directed by Henry Selick. I am The Wiz. Talk to you next week.